Equilibrium, as defined in the dictionary, is a state of no motion or a state of balance. This definition of equilibrium works for the market also. As studied earlier, price is a very important factor that influences both demand and supply. But who and what determines these prices? Demand conditions or supply conditions, or both? The answer of the question lies in the fact that as price affects both market forces of demand and supply, they both together determine the market price of a good or a service. Price is determined in a free market by the interplay of supply and demand. We can underline three dynamic laws of supply and demand. Number one, when quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, the prices tend to rise. And when the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, prices tend to fall. Number two, in a market, larger the difference between quantity supplied and quantity demanded, the greater the pressure on price to rise or fall. And last, when quantity supplied equals quantity demanded, prices have no tendency to change. Price theories answer the question of interaction of demand and supply to determine price in a competitive market. Let us take an example in which at a price of 3 units, and only at this price, the quantity which producers are willing to produce and supply is identical to the amount of consumers that are willing to buy. As a result, there is neither a shortage nor a surplus of commodity X at this price. If we pay attention, we see that surplus causes prices to decline and a shortage causes prices to rise. With neither shortage nor surplus at 3 units, there is no reason for actual price of commodity X to move away from this price. This price is called equilibrium price. Here again, let us get reminded of the fact that an equilibrium represents a situation which can persist and has no tendency to change. Stated differently, the price of X will be established where the supply decisions of producers and demand decisions of buyers are mutually consistent. Graphically, the interaction of supply and demand curves indicate the equilibrium point E. The market price of OP1 at which the quantity demanded by consumers is OQ1. This quantity is different than OQ2, which is the quantity that producers wish to supply. There is thus a surplus of Q1, Q2 at price OP1. It is well known that a surplus leads to a downward pressure on price, and so market price will fall. At the lower price of OP2, the quantity supplied is OQ1, while the quantity demanded is OQ2. There is therefore a shortage at this price, represented by Q1, Q2. This shortage tends to put an upward pressure on price, and market price is expected to rise. Once price settles at an equilibrium level, it can be expected to remain there until something happens to disturb the equilibrium. This can only be a change in one or more of the underlying conditions of demand and or supply which cause demand and or supply to shift. For example, let us consider the market for lettuce. How would this market be affected by a sudden spell of late frost which destroyed many young plants? Clearly, such an occurrence would shift the supply curve to the left, and this would result in a higher price with a lower equilibrium quantity. Suppose, instead, that there were a long spell of warm weather so that people demanded more lettuce to put in their summer salads. In this case, the demand curve would shift to the right, resulting in a rise both in equilibrium price and in quantity. All sorts of things can happen to alter the underlying conditions of supply or demand, but they can all be reduced to 4 possibilities, and either demand or supply will shift, with either a tendency to increase or decrease. Case 1 illustrates the decrease in supply, while case 2 corresponds with the increase in demand. The possibilities are summarized in chart forms also. It is important to note that when a demand curve shifts, there is a movement along the supply curve, with the result that amount supplied and demanded in equilibrium changes, although for different reasons. Similarly, a shift in supply is accompanied by a movement along the demand curve. Supply and demand theory can be used to analyze simple problems and make predictions.